Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel. Thank you for joining this live stream. And in this chat, I'd like to talk about how well paid, and some are very well paid, how well paid that gender studies degree, the jobs you can get with a gender studies degree, how that whole paradigm and landscape has changed. So, I was looking recently at a diversity director at a mid-sized university, and they're being paid the salary. This is before benefits and travel benefits. The salary is almost $400,000 a year for a diversity director. Now, the qualifications for that seem to be A, that you hate white people, B, that you hate Western white civilization, and C, you've got some bullshit fucking gender studies degree or African studies degree or peace studies or some lefty Western hating bullshit degree like that, and that's enough. You may only have a bit of experience, perhaps NGOs, or maybe you've been a flunky in a working as in a lecturer's office or something like that, some basic stuff. But you can be catapulted into this job. You just have to hate white people and the white race and white society enough. That seems to be the primary qualification. And of course, gender studies degrees, and that is a great grounding for hating white people and Western white society. I mean, you can't get a better qualification than that. So some of these jobs are paying very well, and diversity officers is sometimes, what is called a director of HR, for example, human resources, is also in effect a diversity director to a very large extent. So these jobs are multiplying at a rate of knots as the globalist project sort of marches ever onward. And you can even see it in, like some years ago, if you looked at, say, the executive, like on the job boards online, if you looked at the executive employment, there'd be, say, 80% would be private sector jobs, and there'd be a few jobs at like NGOs or diversity officer type gigs. There weren't many of them. They didn't pay very well. Job work in NGO typically paid quite a bit less, and this is why, to a large extent, they got preferential tax treatment, so that they could pay people less, but they wouldn't be taxed as much and that sort of thing. But since they've become activist organisations, and indeed the activism, NGO activist organisations have multiplied exponentially, it's gone out of sight. So if you go and look at a job board now in, say, a big city like Sydney as an example, you see the majority of jobs listed, certainly among the better paying jobs. Now the majority of them are government, for community engagement officers, diversity officers, diversity directors, all sorts of globalist agenda bullshit jobs, and they now are in the majority, the clear majority, by the way. The private sector has shrunk to a small proportion of this, but the overall amount of jobs hasn't really increased. It's roughly the same. So that shows you how far the private sector has fallen and how far the NGO sector has expanded in the better paying jobs. In fact, if you look, say an engineer, there's a job going at the moment, an engineer to be in charge of a major multi-billion-dollar public works project. And with benefits all paid up, it's probably going to be, say, $275,000 a year, give or take. Now, it's a pretty senior job, very responsible job, responsible for a huge budget and lots of workers. There'd be lots of highly qualified people reporting directly into this role. But the diversity director's job at just slightly above middleweight university, that's paying $400,000 a year. And that's before all the international travel, the study tours, and none of that's going to be coach class, by the way. So we're talking first class travel around the place on top of this. Now, this person has nowhere near the qualifications or experience in anything. All they do is hate the West. They hate white males. They hate Western society. That's all they've got to show. And again, some bullshit lesbian gender studies degree, or lesbian dance theory or something like that, and that's it. They've got into that role. Whereas the engineer, 20 years, 30 years experience in the field, superbly qualified, very responsible job. If he gets it wrong, he can go to prison. The diversity director can swan around, do whatever they want, and they're never going to get held accountable really for anything, other than checking how many statements that hate on Whitey have you made today. Other than that, they're not going to be judged by any criteria. So this is how the things have shifted. So if I used to look at gender studies degrees and laugh at them. I in fact still do. But the point now is that all the HR directors, diversity officers, community engagement officers, a lot of jobs in NGOs are now paying very well, and they will only pick from that activist class of people, the gender studies degree type people. If you're not a gender studies lesbian, then you don't get the job. So they're exclusively set aside for those people who particularly hate white society and white men and white people and so on. What it demonstrates is that supporting and furthering and aiding and abetting the globalist project, which is to crush white people, aiding and abetting that now pays very, very well. And you don't need an IQ much above 90 to get the job. All you have to do is just hate the white people. So if you look at sort of the NGO activists around the place that are facilitating the illegal migration, radicalizing peasants in third world basket case countries to make the trip to the first world countries, all with the full support of the globalists, by the way. If you look at those sort of people, they're paid rather well. Having a look, there's a guy who's very active in and around Mexico, aiding and abetting the movement of people, all the illegals moving through there, and he's still in his 20s. But if you look at what he's paid and all packaged up and so on, he'd be over $300,000 a year for that. And the guy's got again some bullshit soft degree. We know whenever fails, that sort of thing. I'm not sure he's gay or not, but probably is. But nonetheless, he's very well paid, and all he's doing is facilitating illegal migration into the first world. I mean, he's breaking numerous laws. And now, if a few of these people do get caught and arrested and dragged in front of a court, it is incredible to me how in every single instance, certainly that I've looked at least, every single instance, they manage to find a very activist judge who gives them a slap on the wrist and lets them out the door without even a fine. Now, how do they find these activist judges, and how do they make sure only that activist judge hears the case, and so these people get settled? I mean, that's a lot of power. That, I mean, you start making phone calls. Okay, so and so from our NGO has been arrested. What I want you to do is to make sure Billy Bob, the judge, gets to hear the case, and I want you to just give a slap on the wrist and let them off, and so on, and don't record any offence against them. I want them to have a clean record when they walk out the door, and they're getting this now. I mean, how do you get that? That is a huge corruption of the judicial system, the judicial process, and the legal process itself. Yet they're able to get that time and time and time again. But it shows you how far the private sector has shrunk in size relative to this NGO, government, community engagement, diversity officer sector, which is a completely a pro-globalist machine, and that's all it is. That's all it's there for, and it's something we need to be aware of, and something we need to talk about and spread this message. And we need to be lobbying our politicians for whatever good that'll do, because they're owned by the globalists as well, to say, hey, enough's enough here. The concerning sidebar of this is if the private sector has shrunk that far, then it goes to show how little new wealth is being created. Sure, there are monopolies and oligopolies and favours and all sorts of things going on, controlled economy, centralised controlled economies. But where's the new wealth coming from? Is it simply coming from exploitation of peasants from the third world? Is that the new source of wealth? Or is it going to be innovation, invention, organizational development, efficiency, those sorts of things. And if the size of the private sector, certainly in the better paid jobs, is any indication, it won't be coming from the private sector. So we've got to wonder where it's coming from. And if it isn't going to come from a planned economy, which I don't think it can, then we're all heading for a very radical decline in our standards of living. You've been with Tasseless today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.